afternoon. Can you all hear me? I'll try again. That feels better. How is that now? All right. How was your morning? My name is Sue Lehman, and I'm a member of the Strive Together board in the South Bronx Rising Together Leadership Circle. I also facilitate a collective impact network in New York City, the Student Success Network, which collaborates with Strive Together around social emotional learning. I'm excited to be at my 4th Strive Together conference and to again see all of you gathered in one room, all of you incredible champions for children and families. I'm also excited to introduce Brittany Packnett, who I've come to know and admire in the last several years. Brittany is Vice President of National Community Alliances at Teach for America, where I'm a director. Teach for America recruits outstanding leaders to teach for 2 years in a low-income community where they come to understand the challenges that low-income families and their children face in attaining an excellent education. The idea is, no matter what they go on to do, and the majority stay in education or work in low-income communities, no matter what they do, they will become lifelong leaders in the fight for racial equity. Like most Teach for America core members, Brittany joined Teach for America straight out of college. She taught for 2 years in Washington, D.C. She told me that Teach for America was a logical choice for her. She always wanted to teach, and she always knew she would fight for social justice. Both her parents were educators and community leaders who exposed Brittany early on to the stories of the great Black women activists. Women like Fannie Lou Hamer, Diane Nash, Margaret Bush Wilson, and Frankie Freeman. Women, Brittany says, who did far more with far less than she and other activists have now. Brittany told me that remembering this is what inspires her every single day. After completing her 2-year teaching commitment, Brittany worked in Washington on Capitol Hill to understand the federal policy mechanism. She returned to Teach for America, first in government affairs, and then as the executive director of her hometown region, which is St. Louis. Brittany was in St. Louis in August 2014 when Michael Brown was shot by a police officer. Along with DeRay McKesson, another outstanding Teach for America alum and activist, Brittany became a prominent voice of hashtag Black Lives Matter. In 2015, Brittany and DeRay turned the Black Lives Matter hashtag into Campaign Zero, which is a comprehensive policy platform to end police violence. It is steeped in listening to communities, and it exudes heart, intentionality, and pragmatism. And I think these 3 words, heart, intentionality, and pragmatism, are good descriptors of Brittany's personal brand of leadership. I realized this morning when I was writing this that a good acronym, the acronym for heart, intentionality, and pragmatism is HIP. Brittany is the new HIP. Brittany exhibited her personal brand of leadership as a member of the Ferguson Commission and President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. In Crooked Media's Pod Save the People podcast, which she and DeRay co-host, and in Love Plus Power, a platform She is created to inspire and outfit people for justice, and that's really the heart of her message today. In recognition of her activism, Brittany has received countless honors, from Emily's List, the Women's Choice Awards, the NAACP, Ebony Magazine, Public Allies, and more. She was named one of Time Magazine's 12 New Faces of Black Leadership, and along with DeRay, won Teach for America's highest alumni award, the Peter Jennings Award for Civic Leadership. This past June, Brittany won Black Entertainment Television's Shine Your Light Award for outstanding community activism. Quite amazing recognition for something that you in this room all think about every day. How do you become more effective advocates and activists for racial equity? So like you here in this room, Brittany knows that no single program or approach can end systemic oppression. It takes a large table working together within and across communities to create permanent change. Please give a warm welcome to my friend, hip, Brittany Packnett.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, hey, y'all. Yes, you answered. You already know what's up. This is great. Good afternoon. I was saying to Sean, can you put that last slide up for a second? I've got the clicker. I can actually do the slides. So I was saying, I'm sure every time somebody sees my picture, they're like, what hair are we going to get today? Changing my hair is my second favorite thing about being a Black woman, because we do that a lot. My first favorite thing is that we're almost always right. I'm also fine with. It is such an incredible honor to be with you all, and I'm just so grateful to you, Sue, for such a thoughtful and intentional introduction. You know, most people will just get up there and read your bio, but you had phone calls, you talked to people I work with and that I know, you pulled from personal stories, and I deeply appreciate it, not just in this moment, but because a lot of you may not know, Sue has been around and involved in and deeply invested in the work of educational equity for a long time. And before we ever knew you, you were a legend for me. She's what we call TF famous, very early on, and I'm trying not to fangirl, but I'm really grateful for you and the time that you spent. Can we give Sue a round of applause for all that you do? There we go. So welcome to the bubble. The bubble we've created for ourselves. Away from the bickering on Facebook and the arguments on Twitter. Away from 24-hour punditry and round-the-clock campaigning. Away from a national conversation on just how polarized all of us are. Do you know the bubble when you see it? The bubble of security and safety where we can focus on one thing and not on everything. The bubble of safety where we get to plan our work before we go out there and do it. The bubble of community where we can bind together in clarity of vision and not be depressed by the happenings of a broken world. Inside the bubble, all you need is a whiteboard and a dream. Inside the bubble, all you need is a plan and some passion. It helps if you've got some equally passionate partners to help you along the way, and I know you all do. We all know that bubble, that conference bubble, let's call it, where life is a bunch of interesting workshops and relentless working groups and vivacious happy hours and fascinating dinner conversation and Jill Biden keynotes and going home on top of the world, ready to change it. Welcome to the bubble. I'm here to burst it. Sorry, not sorry. I'm not sorry because we all know that those we serve rarely get conference invitations. They are They are all too unfamiliar with doorknob breakfast menus and Starbucks in the lobby. They don't get to meet up or check in or debrief in the vestibule after having their energy restored, finding inspiration in a keynote. They are busy dealing with the very real problems we hope to fix. They don't get to set the vision first and execute it later in 90-day chunks because life doesn't leave room for that. They don't get the blessing to work on the things that are bigger than them because right now, outside the bubble, their problems are bigger than the world itself. Right now, outside the bubble, families are worried about taking their children to school because ICE could be waiting around the corner. Right now, outside the bubble, a young woman is walking to class hoping her hijab won't be pulled down again. Right now, outside the bubble, a child waits outside a jail cell to see his mother because family separation has long been the law of this land. Right now, outside the bubble, a trans student is fighting to live as themselves. Right now, outside the bubble, a father is going from job number 2 to job number 3 to do all he can to make sure that his child's life goes from cradle to career and not cradle to incarceration or cradle to an early grave. Right now, outside the bubble, life is real. The bubble is a luxury. The bubble is a privilege. But as Audre Lorde once said, to absorb without use is the gravest error of privilege. Think about that. To absorb without use is the gravest error of privilege. I don't stand in judgment of the bubble or any of us in it. I stand in the power of my responsibility and yours. By virtue of living in the bubble, even for a day or two, we have a duty to do something with all this goodness. After all, to whom much is given, much is required. Y'all could have finished that one. To whom much is given, much is. I figured you knew it because whether you heard that maxim in church on Sunday or from your mama on Monday or from Spider-Man on Friday, it's still true. And now that we've established our collective privilege, what do we do with it? Well, we utilize it in service of the vision, of course. We take every privilege we have and we spend it on the work. Not because we are saviors, but because we know that outside the bubble, folks aren't free, and if they're not free, neither are we. We spend our privilege, and that's what each of you, I'm very sure, are here to do. I know you're here because you know that zip codes shouldn't determine life outcomes any more than identity should. I know you're here because you believe in the American promise of freedom and want to see that everyone they want to make stand up and sing about it actually has it. I know you're here because you want to close every gap and open up every opportunity. I get it. I'm preaching to the choir. But sometimes the choir needs preaching to. Sometimes the choir needs a tune-up and an encouraging word, and honestly, we all need to be out here recruiting as many choir members as we can to the chorus of freedom. You're here to spend your privilege. You're here to do the work. But the most important question yet to come is how? There are, of course, plenty of technocratic answers to this question. Right now, outside the bubble, people are debating it on every platform imaginable. Some of those debates are probably in your inbox right now. Someone is saying it's personalized learning. Someone is saying it's stronger evaluation systems. Someone is saying that the answer is electing them to the school board. Someone else is saying it's getting them off the school board. More technology, better teachers, coding workshops, arts and music, and of course, data, data, data. Of course, all of these things on their own are worthy to be explored, if not implemented. But if all we are is technocrats, we won't ever fix the problem. Freedom is not merely a technical pursuit, it's a moral one. The fight for the equity of all children is the fight for the soul of a nation. I'm glad somebody back there is waking up today. You can't fight for the soul of a nation with data alone, because it only tells part of the story. So just a few days ago, I was sitting with about 24 Harvard College seniors. You all know Harvard, the country's oldest college, the home to would-be presidents and Facebook founders, that Harvard. I'm sitting at a table of 24 Harvard students who have every opportunity looking them in their face. And they're understandably looking for direction, connection, and advice. And as a fellow at the Institute of Politics, it's my job to help give it to them. One student asked what he should aim for in the narrative arc of his career. And I listened as he got very sound, but very technical advice. But you see, he didn't ask about his next steps or should he lay claim to a high title at a young age, or how much money he should be making by the time he was 30. He asked about the narrative. He was curious about the story he's trying to create. His language suggests that he is concerned not just with the operation, but with the spirit of his work. Every child we serve is not merely a data point. They are a dream waiting to be realized. They are each a song waiting to be sung. They are each a person hoping, wishing, wanting the chance to become a fully actualized human being that is never denigrated, but rather celebrated for exactly who they are. Data is good, but so is the story. The whole story. The quantitative and the qualitative one. The assessment of needs and the telling of triumphs. Not the detriments, but the assets. Not just the challenges, but the fortitude. It's not an either or. It's a both and. And I want to suggest to you that the answer to the how, no matter the partnership you formed or the collective approach to the work, abides in the marriage of two words we seldom see together: love and power. Now, I can't take credit for this idea, even though I'd like to. It belongs to Dr. King, and I'm sure it belonged to someone before that. But if I am my ancestors' wildest dreams, then I take direction from their wisdom. And their wisdom tells me that in the bosom of a mother called love and in the fist of a father called power, there lies our key to freedom. We cannot help heal communities we don't love any more than we can help embolden children that we see as powerless. If we could just program our way out of inequity, we'd all be free by now. Everybody could go home and stop eating these free chips. But if our hearts are too broken to see one another's humanity, we've lost before we've even begun. And I'm not talking about some anemic or sentimental love, as Dr. King calls it, or some reckless and abusive power. Disabuse yourself of the notion that love and power have no place in the work of social change and equity for all children. They have a place. They have a central place because, as Dr. King said, power corrects everything that stands in the way of love. Standing in this bubble today means we have power. Here lies the power to set a narrative vision of excellence and equity for children and execute it with resources, support, and partnership. But if we let love inform power, we'll know that if we have the power to set vision for children, then we have the power to set vision with children, with their families, with their communities. And if we have enough love and enough power to set vision with children, then we have the love and power in us to know that the vision can be set by the children, and we can simply be their vessels. You see, the vision can be set by our communities, and we can simply be a part of the means to the end of our collective freedom. To move from working for children to with children to being led by children is the very manifestation of love and of power. It is the evidence that we love children enough to see their power. It is the acknowledgement that all of them are more than a fixed plot points on a graph, but are living, breathing dreams of ancestors since past and futures not yet realized. It is the telling of the whole story, not just the part. Because here's the thing. We who have the privilege of the bubble are responsible to model the world we want to make. We can't simply call for inclusion, but not actually be inclusive. We can't simply aspire to love, but build purely technical solutions. We can't aim for redefined social power, but treat our communities as impotent. We have to be the beloved community as we build it. So before you make your plans, before you write your decks, before you set your strategy, before you raise your funds, ask yourself, have you been led by the children or your ego? Have you been led by the community or by your own pedigree? Are you safe in the bubble, or have you burst it once and for all, making room not for one, but for all? And let me be clear, that message is not just for the white folks, or the rich folks, or the men, or the cis, or the straight. That message is for all of us who ever get to enter the bubble. The day I walked onto the streets of Ferguson was the day I realized that I, a Black woman executive, native to the community in which I was leading and committed to its success, preaching from every pulpit the essence of inclusion and equity, diversity and relentlessness, that was the day I realized that even I had gotten too comfortable in the operation of pursuing justice and had detached from the soul of my community. There were too many strategic plans and not enough breaking of bread. There were too many decks and not enough door knocking. There was too much ego and not enough embrace. There were too many spreadsheets and not enough soul. There were too many meetings and too many dinners and too many retreats and not enough risk. There was too little love. There was too little power. There was no radical imagination. But something about standing on the street, sucking in tear gas alongside an 8th grader who walked right back out into the street to keep on fighting, helped me find my love and my power again. He helped me return myself unto myself and my fight and my grit and my passion and my purpose and my heart and my freedom. I'm a witness that if you let the children lead, you will be transformed. I want us to be transfixed with their dreams and transformed by their personhood. I want us to be radical lovers who are radically powerful. I want us to love radically enough to never give up and be powerful enough to choose to be radical in our work. Let's love our children radically enough and see them as radically powerful. They already have everything in them they need to win, and they are the missing piece of the story we are trying to tell. Finally, let the young people's love and their power give you hope. We each come from a long line of people who, as Sue said, have done far more with far less. And I know it's been hard. I know it feels like our pain is never believed and our oppression is treated like fiction. I know that we are tired of screaming into the void and getting nothing but more evil back in return. But when they told Harriet she'd die if she kept freeing my people, she kept going. And when they told Dolores that a woman had no business organizing farm workers, she kept pushing. And when they tried to kill Malala just for wanting her education, she sat straight up in her hospital bed and told us not to be afraid. With love and with power in your heart, it's time for you, good people of good conscience, to get up off the mat and get to do some good work in the face of evil. Love will defeat hate. Our power will defeat evil. So here's to love, here's to power, here's to daring to be radical, here's to changing the idea that following the lead of our children is even radical at all. Here's to you, here's to me, here's to the work. Here's to love and to power, the very key to our freedom. Thank you. God bless you.
Great, that was great. I love that. I love that. And I know this is a room filled with people who feel the duty to make the world a more equitable place. So you are speaking to people who are right here with you. I also love the let the children lead. That is, as some of us are wont to say, the children are the experts on their own experience.
That's right.
And we adults, seem to feel that they should tell us what we want to know rather than leaving it open to listen. So based on your experience, what are some of the best practices for ensuring that student voices are heard and prioritized to inform us in our work and to inform systems change?
So the first thing about student voice is that we have to know is that we don't have to manipulate it or engineer it to get to a certain outcome. Like a lot of times we treat young people and their voices like we want them to fill in the blank. And so if it's a literal handout or a virtual handout, we are basically trying to guide them to the answer to your point that we want them to give us. And we sometimes come in doing this thing where we are determined to meet them where they are and giving us that answer. So we dumb down our language. We feel like the only way we can talk to them is through, like a Migos song. I don't know what that is. Because young people are smart, they are intuitive, and they know how to express themselves. The question is, are we giving them enough opportunities and enough different ways to do that? Some of them will want to express themselves to you through words. Some of them will want to express it through art. Some of them will want to express it through dance. Some of them will want to express it through music. All of them will require that you earn their trust before they express it to you at all. So one of the best practices, I think, is making sure that we're not trying to engineer their answer. The second one is to actually build the relationship to make sure that we are getting the most accurate information from them, because they know when we just want them to tell us what we want to hear. And I think that the last piece is to make sure that we're actually doing this consistently. So I'm a person who has come to hate the word community engagement. Am I the only, I can't see through these lights, but am I the only one? Okay, apparently I'm not the only one who hates the phrase community engagement. Because I've learned that community engagement for so many people just means, let me go sell you the agenda that I wrote 2 weeks ago without you and have you rubber stamp it. And even if you don't rubber stamp it, I'm still gonna go and do what I was gonna do anyway. That's not community engagement. And when we do that, we do it once. We throw a lovely luncheon, right? We feed people. We say, come on into our office instead of actually going physically to where they are and finding out what they want and what they need. And we say, yes, we've engaged the community. And then we march right out and we forget those folks' names. We never have another phone call. We never have another lunch. We don't know where these people live, where they worship, where they play sports, where they watch sports. We are not actually engaging. What we're doing is selling ourselves and hoping that they will be our ambassadors. And so I think that whether it's student voice, parent voice, influencer voice, community voice, we actually have to not engineer the answer. We have to earn the trust, and we have to be there consistently to continue to hear what students and communities want.
I love that. So you talk about inclusion of students, youth, you talk about inclusion of the community, creating inclusive environments. So many of our organizations are focused on diversity today. And perhaps not enough on inclusiveness in of their own staff.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that? What experience have you had with, and I know at Teach for America, there's a lot of experience and lessons to be learned. What can you tell us about?
How long do we have? So let's talk about diversity for a second before we get to inclusion. Because I complained about this on Twitter this morning. If you follow me, you already know what I'm about to say. I feel like, everything gets co-opted, right? And diversity has now been co-opted to mean just difference. And that's not what it means. Diversity is not, you like to bike to work and I like to take the train. That's not diversity. And people are like, well, we have affinity groups for, no, I don't need you to have an affinity group for a soccer player. That's called a soccer team. It's not an affinity group. We also were doing this thing, though, where we are conflating ideology with identity. And so we are, and I am somebody who is a firm and fervent proponent of creating welcoming environments for all people. I want to be very clear about that. But it is very different to feel like people are questioning my political ideology versus someone who feels like when they come into their workplace or their school or their community or their institution that their personhood is being questioned. There's a really essential difference there. If someone is saying, I do not feel comfortable as an LGBTQ plus identifying person, I do not feel comfortable as a person of color, I don't feel comfortable as a woman, that is different than saying I don't feel comfortable as a Democrat or a Republican. And I think that we have to be clear about what we mean by diversity if we're ever gonna get started. So that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is to your point, we have to recognize that representative diversity is not enough. There are lots of us who can put out great brochures about our organizations, and the cover will look like the United Colors of Benetton. We will have every color represented, we will have every nationality represented, and it's lovely. But if all of those people, A, do not feel welcome, and B, do not have access to the same opportunities and can get to the same outcomes as each other, then our environments and our institutions are not truly inclusive or equitable. And that is actually the work that we're called to do. So it's not enough for us to just be bringing in a diverse set of people to try to function under the same systems that have been oppressing them in the first place. That's not actually what we're here to create. And again, we have to be the beloved community that we're trying to create for young people and for communities. So what that means and what that has meant at Teach for America is that we actually start to measure whether or not teams are inclusive and equitable. Go figure. We measure everything else. We measure whether you're raising your money. We measure whether you're organized in your work. We measure whether you are hiring people on time. We measure every single thing, am I right? But we treat this like it can't be measured, and that's not true. There are scholars and researchers and folks all over this country that you can pay and invest in to help you figure out how to measure how equitable and inclusive your environments are. Those same people can train your managers to be equitable and inclusive leaders. And it's about whether, thank you. Because it's about whether or not we're willing to invest one day of diversity training, and we've all seen that episode of The Office. It doesn't really work that well. It's the difference between doing that and actually making a long-term investment to improve your systems and to give your people the skill to reach those bars. And it's not necessarily an issue of will, right? There are lots of us who want to be working in inclusive and equitable environments. Whether or not we have experienced oppression in our lives, there are lots of us that have intentions toward that thing, that want that thing to be true. But just because you will it to be true doesn't mean that it will happen. And so we have to make sure that we are developing in our people the actual skill to go and do those things. So when we were in St. Louis, after Michael Brown was killed, I did not quit my job, which lots of people thought was a very wild choice, because just to put it together for you, we were out in the streets every night until maybe 2 or 3 a.m. I'd sleep for a few hours, I'd wake up and I'd get ready to do my executive director job, which is already a 70 or 80 hour a week job, right? We're raising money, I'm managing, it's totally wild. I would not wish it on anybody. We were raising $4 million a year. I was managing a team of 22. We had 20,000 students in classrooms all around the region, in core member and alumni classrooms. And I felt like I couldn't leave my job because, just as I said in my speech, Ferguson really helped me unlock my own understanding and responsibility toward developing culturally responsive leaders and educators for my city. And I recognized that everybody didn't have the privilege to do that. Lots of people don't have the privilege to do what we do every day. We actually get to go to work and get paid to make the world a better place. That's not what a lot of people get to do. A lot of people have to earn not even a living wage to do something that's not very important to them. And so I recognized that as a privilege, and I said, it also means that I have a responsibility, again, to develop culturally responsive leaders and teachers for this community. So we did two things. One, for our teachers, we developed a whole different system of teaching that we localized based on principles of culturally responsive teaching. And all culturally responsive education says is that rigor, along with cultural confidence, so me believing in who I am and where I come from, as well as critical consciousness, understanding the world and the role I can play in changing it, that all three of those things deserve equal footing in the classroom. That you cannot teach the civil rights movement without helping people understand that, hey, this stuff is still going around in the world, and that critical thinking skill that you just developed in your literature class can be useful to set you up to go and change your own community in the same way that people did in the 50s and 60s, right? So that's what culturally responsive pedagogy is. So we changed that. The other thing, though, that we did was we said we can't tell our teachers to do something and then not be doing it ourselves. So I hired a new chief of staff, and half of her job was to make sure that I could somehow handle all the things that I was doing in a day. And the other half of her job was to develop a culturally responsive leadership rubric for our staff. So we had to start measuring it. It was in people's performance reviews. It was in their quarterly reviews. It was in their biannual reviews. And it helped influence how much people got in their raises. Suddenly, when we started having that conversation, people were like, well, here, what books can I read and how many skills can I? In the same way, like, this is another metric that you need to meet in order to secure the quality of our outcomes, period. There is no negotiating that. So it is possible. We have done the work, and we didn't do it perfectly. And that's just one example that we did at Teach for America, but all over the country at Teach for America, on our national teams and regional teams, those are the kinds of efforts people are making to move from theory to practice when it comes to true equity and inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I've followed this story, and it's been absolutely fascinating. We started with a diversity officer.
Yes.
And then said, no, that's not the right way to go.
Because it's everybody's job.
Yeah.
It's everybody's job.
And what you're saying about seeing our people, our staff, for who they are,
yes.
Seeing youth for who they are.
Yes.
This also means seeing ourselves
yes.
for who we are,
absolutely.
Which is kind of where
yes.
it has to start. So you've moved from, I mean, you do so many things, I can't possibly keep track
Somebody
of them.
asked me where I came, you asked me where I came in from this today, and I was like, I do not remember the city I was in before this. I was in Boston, so yes, I'm here now.
Anyway, and she's going somewhere tomorrow, but I can't remember that. But anyway, so the last question I have is, how do you move from community engagement, which you don't like that word. There's a question here. It comes from
yes.
the audience.
No, this is the right, I can see it. This is the right question. It's all good.
Okay,
whoever asked this, it's a great question.
Okay, so Brittany, how do you move from community engagement to community empowerment?
So you see why I said this is a great question? You get out of the way. And I know that's really hard because we all have these great degrees and these great ideas, and man, does our whiteboard handwriting look awesome. But the power is already in the community. The question is whether or not we acknowledge it and recognize it and then resource and support it or not. So when I was on I was appointed to the Ferguson Commission. It was 16 people from around the region. We were appointed by the governor, who many people felt was not doing a good job in the face of this uprising. And, okay, well, that was the most awkward applause of the entire time. But it's kind of true. You're from Missouri? Okay, so then, yeah, so you know firsthand.
He's allowed to say.
Yes, you were totally you get it. But people not only felt like he was doing a poor job, people were very wary of this commission because historically, what we call riot commissions are created not to uplift the voice of the people, but to silence the voice of the people, right? They are created to say, okay, stop your whining, stop your complaining, everybody go home, we're handling it now. And then they set up 10 to 20 people to go write a report that then sits dusty on a shelf that nobody ever makes any changes because of. And to their credit, the two co-chairs of the Ferguson Commission, Rich McClure, who is white, Starsky Wilson, who is black, both of whom were members of the Teach for America board, and I introduced them, so I like to take a lot of credit for what we did. to their credit, they said, we will not be another riot commission. We will not be the Kerner Commission replayed in 50 years. We will not write a report that was written just by the 20 of us and let it get dusty on the shelf. So they read all these books, and we had all of these design conversations, and myself and Starsky and a woman named Tracy Blackman and a young man named Rasheen Aldridge, all of us who were still active protesters, we went to other folks in the protest community and we said, look, if this commission goes left, our commitment to you is that all 4 of us will walk together. Because we are here to help represent our collective power. If this is a body that doesn't want it, then this is a body that doesn't want us, right? So we had to be willing to take that risk and have the governor be mad and have all of his funders be mad and all of that kind of stuff. We had to be willing to take the risk to seat ourselves not in our own power and ego, but in the power of the community. So then from there, the structure that we built was truly and honestly the greatest example of inclusive democracy that I've personally ever witnessed. So at every single meeting, a couple of things happened. One, we had open comments, which is exactly what you think it is. It was like people standing at a podium yelling at like the city council or something. That's exactly what it was. But we only let that happen for 10 minutes because the most important part of the meeting every single time was our small group work. So we would split people up into small groups, and we would ask them, based on the theme of that meeting, 2 questions. One, what is your lived experience with this particular issue, whether it was education, policing, municipal courts, economics? What is your lived experience with this? Because that is important data too, right? The qualitative and the quantitative. And then we said, what are your solutions for these problems? And if you go right now to forwardthroughferguson.org and you look at the report that came out of the Ferguson Commission, and in particular, you look at some of the laws that have already been passed and some of the changes that have already been made in St. Louis, they came directly from the community. So when I say get out of the way, I'm not speaking in hyperbole and I'm not being dramatic. I'm being very literal. We got out of people's way. We recognized that some of the best ideas were coming from the places that were the hardest hit. We recognize that often the people closest to the solution were the people closest to the problem, and we didn't try to engineer or say, you're not using the right word to talk about that problem, or why didn't you write it on the whiteboard, or why didn't you present it in a deck? We recognize that the solution and the brilliance and the clarity of it can come in all forms instead of just the form that we're used to and instead of just the archetype that we hold. So when I say get out of the way, I genuinely mean it. And St. Louis now, because of this work, has a vision to be fully racially equitable by 2039, which people think is like impossible because it's St. Louis.
That's amazing.
But it is the work that we are called to do, right? So we came out with this report that was totally community driven, that made no bones about the fact that this is about racial equity, and we use the words racial equity, we use the words supremacy and oppression, all the words people told us we couldn't use. We did all of these things to keep it real, to keep it a buck for the people, and to make sure that we were actually amplifying the voices of our communities in the solutions that we are helping to drive. So we are the vessel, the nonprofits are the vessel, the collective impact organizations are the vessel, the community holds the vision, and therefore they're actually dedicated and committed to seeing it through.
Yeah. Great. So we have heart, we have intentionality, we have pragmatism, but we also have another P, that's passion.
Thank you.
So
I'm hip with two
Brittany
Ps.
is hip. Thank you, Brittany.
Thank
Let's
you.
hear it
Thank
for
you
Brittany
all. Thank you
Packnett.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, I'm just going to introduce someone else. So, Josh Davis is just going to tell us what our next steps are.
That's right.
Thanks,
So
Josh.
I've got some logistics. Before I get to that, though, Brittany, thank you. Thank you for that challenge. I know that everyone in this room is sort of nibbling at some of the morsels, the multiple morsels that you dropped in, thinking about the application of that. But I'll tell you the things that really stood out to me is your comments about privilege and ego. And it really makes me reflect on I'm not special, I just have a responsibility. And I think our current systems and the ways in which we conduct this work and what requires us to be able to do this work, the flow of resources, the concentration of power, oftentimes lead us to lean into our ego when we're successful at doing that. But that's just really powerful for me, and I hope that that resonated with some of the rest of us, that the privilege that we have to do this work does not make us special, and to remember that and to hold on to the responsibility of the work that's at hand. So I'm Josh Davis. I've been on staff about 6 months now. I'm the Vice President of External Affairs. I actually sought this organization out because of the work that I was doing in community in the Mississippi Delta. Yeah, I was on a 6 or 7 month tour to figure out where my next opportunity was going to go, how I was going to take the lessons learned, conducting collective impact through a grant-funded program, moving to results culture in an organization, and where I could see that reflected back at the national level. And this collection of community members and this network is exactly where I wanted to land. We heard Jennifer speak this morning about moving to 24 communities by 2023, this new designation that we're calling systems transformation, and we can get there. This is so important to come and have our spirits filled in moments like this so that we can go back home and just stay into the fight. This is something that I'm certain that we'll be fighting throughout the course of our lifetimes and beyond our lifetimes, and so this is continual. But this was really powerful in thinking about what it's going to take for us to hold each other up in that resilience. So I know that education is the equalizer, and I think that part of the reason why we're all doing this work is because we believe that education is one of the ways to level the playing field. And so I've seen that borne out in my life, as I'm sure many of you have seen that borne out in your life, and that's one of the reasons that we are here in this gathering to figure out how we can impact so many of those opportunities and access points in our local communities through this connected work that we're doing. So with that, I'm really, really proud to be one of the rookies, one of the newer members of the Strive Together family. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be able to meet some of you and think about the resources that we bring to bear from the national office that can really support you who are conducting the work in partnership on the ground. So on to the logistics. The first thing we want to cover is there's a group photo. So just out to your left, my right, just out these double doors. Next on the agenda is a group photo. So before our second block of workshop starts, join us in the grand ballroom on the second floor for the group photo. Everyone, please remember to bring your pennants. You should have found one on your tables when you sat down. So as soon as we snap the photo, you'll be able to go to your next learning opportunity. We have 2 more workshop blocks, 2:30 to 3:50 and 4:10 to 5:25. Another thing we would like for everyone that is on social media to really dive into is to continue to use social media and share what you're learning at each plenary and workshop using the hashtag #GoFarGoTogetherC2C. We also want to remind everyone about the networking reception. Oftentimes, this is where the real work gets done. So we invite you all to attend the network reception with us back here at the Metropolitan Ballroom to connect informally with your peers. We have a late addition to the convening this year. Rita Aguilar, who is with College Promise Campaign, is able to meet with communities who are interested in starting a College Promise Scholarship Fund. Rita's going to be in the Shill Soul Room, which is on the 4th floor at 4 p.m. today. So it is now time to move over and take the photo. So if you'll head to the grand ballroom on the 2nd floor, and let's get this photo taken so we can get on to the rest of our learnings. Thank you.